So next month in September 2024, it will have officially been 6 full years since we saw Nintendo launch Nintendo Switch Online, specifically with the base tier of the service, which is now running today. And that's what I want to tackle in this video, is what has Nintendo done to build out this service and offer value at a $20 annual price point for the subscription price for this tier of the service over the course of these 6 years, and do we consider it to be worth it today in broad terms, especially when you look at the competition and how subscription services, especially in gaming and entertainment, are ever evolving, and with that coming with a lot of higher price hikes. So I want to hop over to the Nintendo Switch, walk through some of the content library that's available for the base tier, talk about all the features you get with it, and have that 6-year review on just what Nintendo's done with the service so far and where they are headed from here, and whether or not they are on the right path and what to expect in terms of things like price adjustments as we talk about Nintendo transitioning into their next gen hardware and what that might ultimately entail for this Nintendo Switch Online base tier service. So we'll get on the same page with all of that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And with that, we'll hop right over to the Nintendo Switch console. So really surprising that we're at the 6+ year point already for Nintendo Switch Online. And of course, as I mentioned, for the purposes of this video, we're talking specifically the value that the base tier adds, which is these 3 systems in terms of the library of games you have. Of course, the biggest addition being in 2023 with the Game Boy family of systems launching, and Game Boy and Game Boy Color is considered one system from Nintendo, even though it feels like 2 from a generational power standpoint, but nonetheless it's considered one. And of course, you have access to Game Boy and Game Boy Color games through this emulator, Super Nintendo and NES, and they really have done a lot to build out the library over the years as time has gone on. I think they've been very inconsistent with their update schedule, but at the same time, whenever you stop and zoom out and realize just how many of their classic games they have added in, it is rather large. And to be fair, you have these SP editions that kind of clutter up what we're looking at here in terms of them not being really additional games, but rather kind of like a ROM hack version of something that Nintendo has already had on the service for quite some time. And that's definitely, I never got excited for any SP editions being added in there, but you know, if you like to play certain sections of the games or play with certain modifications, those are worth checking out potentially. One thing that I did not know until I was actually just kind of messing around, and I guess it's not that button, it is the Y button. Maybe you could always do this is just news to me, but you can move around your games in any order. So like if there's particular ones that you want to be featured bigger and other ones you want to be kind of more condensed like this, you're free to basically go ahead and move around however you want, which I think is a really cool feature. It's probably been there the whole time. I've probably just never messed with it, but nonetheless, you can see plenty of timeless classics, but obviously still some missing ones. We recently got the Mega Man games added in on Game Boy. We don't have any of the Mega Man NES games, and obviously Capcom likes to release those in collections, and that's largely probably a big portion of why. But some of the licensed games from Nintendo do need to step their game up, in my opinion, in terms of the frequency of releasing of big third-party games. You know, you would definitely have to pay some fees for the Star Wars franchise, you know, Mickey Mouse, a lot of the different ones that, you know, you get into the SNES and even some of the Game Boy installments, very enjoyable, you know, and so I do hope that they do stuff like that in the future. One thing we've also seen Nintendo really lean into recently with this service is essentially adding in games that were never localized, meaning still to this day never localized. Like if you boot these up, you will be reading Japanese text and they're entirely Japanese gameplay experiences. But you know, you can still enjoy those games nonetheless. But I wish that Nintendo could use some really cheap basic AI, something just to essentially do the bare minimum work of translation, so you're not just guessing at what the menus say. But nonetheless, that's kind of some of the more recent updates that we've seen for this service. But one thing that, as we talk about kind of the library of games and what we've seen them do over the course of time, that you have to call out with this subscription service, because it is where it really does stand apart from the competition, and that's that as Nintendo users, we get access to the online community. Now, of course, we don't have online on-system chat or anything like that. You have to do all of that through a phone app, which is ridiculous in 2024. But we do have access to play with friends together, even in a lot of these old retro games that would have clearly never been possible when they were first released, for the $20 annual price point. You get cloud save data and you get access to all of these retro library of games for that $20 price point. And when you start to think, if somebody signed up for this service more recently and didn't pay this entire time over the 6 full years like I have, and kind of seen these games get to where they're at now, but if you're just hopping fresh into the subscription service, Nintendo really has done an impressive job at a $20 price point for just how many timeless classics from these 3 systems that you can essentially hop into and enjoy. We will just briefly boot up Donkey Kong Country Returns because it's one of my favorite games of all time. But we have that going for us in terms of the type of updates that we've seen over the long haul. And the big thing about going forward for the service that I don't think Nintendo will mess up is the hitting the reset button, because obviously, while it's nice to own your games, and Virtual Console definitely had its place in the market, I do find myself not hooking up my Wii or Wii U anymore. And if I did hook those up, while I have a pretty large library of Virtual Console games, they don't do me a whole lot of good. Of course, I don't have to pay an ongoing subscription service for them. That is nice. But the amount of games that I rebought from the Wii era to the Wii U, or rebought on the Wii U rather from the Wii that I had already purchased, that really does start to stick out to you as a sore point. And while Nintendo, if they continued to raise subscription prices, maybe one day could quickly become not worth it, at a $20 annual price point, I would argue that with the large library of games we have between all 3 systems that we continually will have access to for now and into the future, for the amount of money I've spent total, I've definitely come out ahead with the subscription service. And there's probably a large portion of games that I wouldn't have actually played through were it not for the fact that they were part of this subscription service. So there's definitely some upsides to subscription services. It's not all bad news. The value is typically the upside. And I personally feel like Nintendo, in their base tier right now, is doing a pretty good job of delivering that value consistently. And that's where it comes into the conversation of how do they migrate this to next-gen hardware. And I think that they actually do build out a more robust feature set. I think that we see things like on-system party chat, direct messages to friends, hopefully usernames instead of friend codes, for the love of God, and then have some more classic retro systems built in as well. But the big value point is going to be also that we're not losing all of the retro games and hitting the reset button on them, but rather continuing to expand them. And I could see Nintendo potentially going up in the price point of maybe like $30 annually when it comes to their next gen system, but they're gonna, reinforce that with the on-system voice chat and the ability to do more things online. Maybe custom themes are tied to an online subscription of some sort. Maybe things are just more seamless and built into the OS overall, so it's really easy to hop in and out of any game and any save state, even in a game that you have. Like, I think Nintendo could still tweak a lot to improve it. But again, when you stop and look at the Xbox Game Pass price increases, which of course is a different type of service to begin with, because you're talking about playing new games as they come out. But then you look at PlayStation Plus and kind of the price increases that they've gone to more recently. Nintendo's not quite as bad of a price anymore. You're not paying $80 annually. You're paying $20 to have access to online play. You have to have at least the base tier, the essential tier of Sony PlayStation Plus, in order to access their online community at all. So I do think that we're not necessarily winning out in every aspect, but in certain ones, definitely not doing bad as Nintendo fans. So with all of that said, I do think that as Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch Online continues to propel into the next gen console, for $20 annually, Nintendo's done a pretty impressive job here, and we'll end up by just taking a quick look at the Game Boy library, because as I mentioned, some big licensed games dropped recently. We got the entire Mega Man 1 through 5, the Game Boy versions, which are essentially different than the original NES one, so they're worth checking out. And these are games that Capcom could have been working on a re-release for of some sort, and Nintendo essentially wrote them a check to get them on the service. I hope we see more stuff like that. And I do think that as you talk about Zelda Oracle of Ages and Seasons being playable, and Pokemon trading card game, but especially if we got the other Pokemon games in here one day, like, throw in Red and Blue, and we're really going to be talking in terms of value. And then, you scale that up with the Game Boy Advance and into the expansion pack here, and you can really do a lot with the service for the long term. So 6 years later, I would argue that where it stands right now, Nintendo Switch Online, at least at the base tier price point of $20 annually, does drive a lot of value, is a nice service to have if you are a Nintendo Switch owner, of course. and I'm excited to see what the future holds for it. So let me know in the comments down below if you think Nintendo's doing the right thing with Nintendo Switch Online, if you'd like to see major changes that are not here today in this version of NSO, and what would those changes be? And are you somebody who is going to be planning on maintaining your NSO membership as we talk about the next gen console, or might you reconsider signing up at all or not migrating over to the new system depending on what the features are? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.